My apologies in advance. This particular video is a little bit longer than the others. It might actually be closer to 10 minutes, but it was hard to separate out the information. Anyway, remember that we're still focusing on willingness to communicate. So if we go back to the book and the encyclopedia, and I asked you which one you would choose, was your decision based on perception or fact? Had you actually read the book or the encyclopedia? Probably not, so it's based on perception. Important. The decision to pay attention is based on the perception of the benefit to cost ratio. A guy named Wilbur Schramm came up with something he called the fraction of selection, and this is in your reading. But the probability of involvement is equal to the promise of reward over the potential effort. Promise and potential. He's looking at perception also. So how does all that apply? You have to design any communication strategy for the appearance of a high benefit to cost ratio. Consider the following. If you think about covers of books, if you think about trailers in movies, if you think about displays of goods, advertising hotels, trying to get somebody to come in for a loan, all of those things, on the initial impression, when people first look at it, they have to believe that there's high benefit for low cost. Think about advertising lines. Boy, this tastes great. This is the best I ever experienced. If you want to be, have more sex appeal, status, whatever, it's never been easier to borrow money, get a home loan, car loan. This is the cheapest way to go. Look at all of those. Every single one of them is designed to either increase your perception of benefit or decrease your perception of cost, or both. But it's still the benefit to cost ratio. If you can just incrementally make that a better ratio, you can grab more people. Consider these. Now, I happen to be in this particular profession, and I'm a little sorry to show these, but if you look at them, would anybody read them? Microenvironment, boy, that turns me off right away. All caps and no visuals, tiny text, just a whole bunch of things. Warning, don't do this, don't do that. A lot of text up in the upper one. If you look at the couple up on the right, I watched them for about, when they first came, and they stayed about 10 seconds. They were trying to figure out the map. The one on the bottom, you notice there are people actually reading that, in part because that's the only way you can get information, and in part because that's the Alamo. So people are fascinated by it. High benefit to read about things you're fascinated by, so they go to the effort. Doesn't mean that we do everything badly in this particular profession. Three-dimensional stuff, wow, I'd go pay attention to that. When I was younger, I might have hung my brother or sister on them, but cactus growing out of a sign. This was really intriguing. What is all of that stuff that happened to be all of the webbing they collected off of one route in Mount Rainier on one day? The glory hole. Wow, that's a weird looking thing. I want to know what it is. Technology, or in this particular case, it is the delivery instrument, the medium, plays a significant role in assessment of benefit to cost. Color, another important factor. So lots of things to assess, lots of things that you're assessing when you're looking at benefit versus cost. So you have to design for an appearance of high benefit and low cost. But don't stop there. You ever quit reading a book and never pick it up again? What happened? The benefit to cost ratio, or your perception of it, was good enough to start. Well, maybe it was more boring or whatever. But what does that tell you about the process of evaluating benefit to cost? I hope it tells you the same thing it tells me, that the assessment of benefit to cost is continuous. You're constantly second-guessing yourself, unless you're just totally focused on something. So how does that apply? I was hoping you would ask. You have to design for actual high benefit to cost also. And that means I got to start by meeting expectations. Well, how do I know what their expectations are? Well, you've actually created them. The perception of benefit to cost is equal to expectations. You have actually created an expectation for the benefit I'm going to get at the cost in terms of time and cognitive attention. So, follow through. If you don't have an audience. I don't know how many people have gone in for a loan, but I have. And I went into a place that advertised, this only takes you an hour. About an hour and a half into it, when it clearly was going to take a lot longer, I simply turned around and walked out. They think they've got you, though. I mean, once you've sat down there and invested an hour, it's like, oh, this will just take a little longer, and I've already gone through this. And so people stay. But it doesn't work for everybody. Flip plates, reveals. These are called reveals in exhibit lingo. And in this case, you lift a flap or push it, I'm not quite sure. I think it's lift a flap, and supposedly there's something underneath. Well, it's interesting because, there's pictures on the outside. I'm looking, maybe it's an interesting fact, maybe it's more picture, but you flip it, and it's about 4 or 5 lines of text, and it's technical stuff. And then I looked at the number of flip plates, and I went, no way. So I did about 2 of these and quit because they didn't follow through on the expectation of benefit to cost. The benefit wasn't what I expected, and it was a much higher cost. I'm trying to think of this guy's name, and it will come to me. He's a bigwig in cognitive stuff. Anyway, he was giving a lecture up at Portland, and had written several books that I really liked. So I went up to listen to him, and it turned out that he was one of the absolute worst speakers in the world. Didn't know how to use overheads, PowerPoints. I mean, he actually read from them, and he would put about 400 words of text. He put everything that he was going to say on an overhead and then read from it. He lost me in about 5 seconds. So you got to follow through with the benefit you're offering at the cost you're offering. One of the advertising campaigns I really liked was British Airways when they did what I call the undersell approach. They had commercials where they'd come on and they'd go, well, we're not the best airline, but we'll get you there. Reasonably on time. We don't serve the best food, but it's edible. In other words, they really played down the expectations, and people would get on and go, wow, this food is a lot better than I thought. This plane's a lot better than I thought. So they created low expectations and then exceeded them. So the issues with actual cost typically occur in the delivery of the information. And what you're trying to eliminate are unnecessary costs. Just as examples, and again, I'm drawing from a field that I'm very familiar with, glare. They could have put something to avoid the glare, but the glare makes it much harder to read. All caps is much harder to read, significantly harder to read than upper and lower case. If you think about it, upper and lower case, we actually recognize the shape of words by the ascenders, the parts that go up, and the descenders, the parts that go down. If they're all caps, everything's a rectangle. So you can't really recognize words as fast. You can't read as fast. Tiny text, and my gosh, it's right justified. That really makes it hard to figure out where you're supposed to start the next sentence. Contrast? That one would be hard to read, particularly if you're colorblind. Look at where the information is. Now, a lot of visitor centers do that because that's the space they have available. But the human head moves about 15 degrees up and down. If you exceed that, then pretty soon you're going to go, oh man, I got a pain in my neck. Okay, so you stop reading. Italics, and not only this sign is on the ground, so you have to bend down and try to read something in italics. Now, a lot of these things creep in because designers think, oh, these are interesting and different ways to do things. Well, there's a reason why those things haven't been done before. They don't work in terms of communication. So, you'd have to design to keep an actual high benefit to cost ratio. Doesn't mean you can ignore the perception as you go through. When you quit reading a book, the book that I said, imagine a book you quit reading, never picked up, did you know what was coming? No, you didn't. The decision to continue is still based on your perception of the benefit to cost, but you simply have actual experience now as a factor. You make the assumption that the level of benefit and the level of cost that you've just experienced will carry throughout. You also, though, may look ahead. Take a look at these signs. This is a brochure, actually. So assume that the front cover was something that looked really interesting, and you flipped it over. Which text is likely to be read, or more likely to be read? When I do workshops, almost everybody chooses the text on the right. Why? It's smaller, and there's more of it. Well, look at the difference is in the chunking and the subheads. So if we look at why people would choose this, you believe that you can choose to read one chunk at a time. I only have to choose one of those chunks. I don't have to read all of the rest of it, and I can get a benefit for its small cost. And what the subheads do is they provide an opportunity to advertise the benefit. That's why you want to, use lots of subheads, because you can market what's in that particular passage. Compare that to this. Lack of a heading, you have no idea what the benefit is of reading this, and because of the lack of subheads, you think you have to read the entire thing to get the benefit. So you look ahead and you go, I don't think so. Your perception of the benefit to cost is just not, it's low. So you have to design for the perception of a high benefit to cost ratio throughout. Quick summary. For communication to occur, your target audience has to be willing to engage in and process the information. Willingness is based on perception of personal benefit compared to personal cost. You're going to be more successful if you design for a specific audience. Figure out who you're trying to reach, focus on what they consider benefit, what they consider cost, and design accordingly. Design for the appearance of high benefit and low cost throughout. Not just appearance. Design for actual high benefit and low cost. So meet that expectation of the benefit that they're going to get at the cost that they're expecting. The final video gives you clues on how to do your assignment this week.